Welcome to the Fermented Homestead. If you're new here, my name's Anna, and on this channel, I'm sharing our journey of learning how to turn our home into a homestead. Today, we are making some split pea soup. We had a bunch of ham in the freezer, and we're trying to kind of whittle that down and get a bunch of stuff out of the freezer. And we also have a bunch of split peas, so we're gonna make some split pea soup, so we have some actual home canned soup on our pantry shelf. We don't have a tremendous amount of it. We have some canned stuff, like from the store, but I wanna have some good quality home canned soup on the shelf. So we're going to be making the split pea soup recipe out of the Amish canning cookbook, and we're going to be making a slight change to it. So I've been kind of researching what recipe that I actually wanted to make with this, and I have a bunch of beef bones also that I wanted to clear out of my pantry, my freezer. And so I have a huge batch of bone broth going over there. I've already used it for one recipe, and I tried to find a recipe that used the beef broth with it, but I couldn't really find any. So last night I made like a different recipe, but just a split pea soup recipe with the beef broth in there. Oh my gosh, this stuff is so good. It has like a smoky kind of flavor to it. It just has a much more, it's not like an overpowering, intense, in your face kind of flavor, but it just makes it a pretty, a kind of a bland soup, and it turns it into something that's really good. It's probably a good substitute if you don't like have any kind of a smoked ham hock or something like that. Like, this is probably a pretty decent substitute for that. So we're gonna get started. The first thing that we need to do is take 6 cups of dried split peas and 6 quarts of water, and we need to, it says to combine them in a large pot, and it says to use water, but we're going to use beef broth, and it won't change the time on it at all. They have the same, like the beef broth has like a 20 or 30 minute canning time, but this is going to be canning for much longer. So don't quote me on those times. It's just a much lower time than this is, because we're canning this for the beef time, or not beef time, but for the meat time. And so it's just going to can much longer. That substitution won't matter. And then it says to bring to a boil, reduce heat, cover, and simmer for 1 hour until the peas are soft. We're gonna try and pour this in. I have a little measurement guide on the inside of this pot, so I think we don't have to measure it. I don't think I'm gonna try pouring that. It seems kind of dangerous. I'm kind of looking at the fat level. I'm just making sure it's not too much going in. It's a pretty low percentage, but it's still going to have a pretty good amount of fat in here. And I know that a lot of places tell you that you're not supposed to use fat in recipes, and I try to avoid it for the most part. But there's also a lot of places that say that it doesn't matter for them, and they haven't had any issue. So I'm not super crazy about eliminating the fat, but I certainly don't add it, and I try to kind of lessen it. But I'm not totally nuts about it, and it hasn't affected me really much at all. And if you are concerned about it though, you can always if you're using broth instead of the water, whatever kind of broth you're using, you can always cool it, put it in the fridge, let the fat layer on top will solidify, and then you can just kind of chip it right off. And if you pour it off slowly, you'll kind of get mostly the top fat layer is mostly what's going to pour out, so it'll help you kind of dwindle down the amount of stuff that's in there. A little bit more. Just for good measure. Okay. Set this giant vat aside. One thing that's really great about making your own bone broth here is that, especially if you're using soup bones, you get a lot of leftover meat. So this is going to go into another recipe for some kind of a beef vegetable soup that I'm going to try and make either today or tomorrow. And then we also have another batch of a different kind of a soup that I'm going to be doing with more ham in it. It's going to be like a ham bean kind of soup. So stay tuned for all of those kinds of recipes. So the next thing we're going to do, I rinsed this as best as I could, but here are all of the 6 cups of lentils. And with the peas, you want to make sure that you're rinsing them off as good as you can. If you notice when you're kind of rinsing them off, it'll be kind of cloudy water. And that is, I think it's called oligosaccharide. I could be totally wrong on that. But from what I've read, that is the thing that makes you feel kind of gassy, if you know what I'm talking about. And so if you kind of rinse those off, at least in the peas, in beans and things like that, it's a little bit more ingrained in it. But I tried so hard to do my research on this and find out if split peas needed to be soaked like with other beans, you need to soak them in like vinegar water overnight. It'll kind of draw out those sorts of things that will give you kind of some digestive upset. And so everything that I came across, I mean, I didn't like research for like 12 hours, but you know, I did a fair amount of looking into it. I would call it looking into it instead of research. But I couldn't find anywhere that said that you should soak these for very long. So I didn't do that, but I did rinse them very well. And in that research, that's where I came across the oligosaccharides. And I was saying that if you want to rinse it until the water runs clear, and that should get rid of a fair amount of that kind of digestive discomfort. So just a little note for you. So we're gonna put this on the burner here. So as you can see, we have our split peas and broth on the stove here. And all we're gonna do, I have it turned up to high heat, you can see there. I'm gonna stir it just to make sure there's no clumps in here. And then we're gonna let it come to a boil. When it boils, we're gonna lower the heat and just let it simmer for an hour so we can soften these peas up. So I'll bring you guys back in about an hour, kind of show you what we have already so far. The lentils and the broth are almost finished cooking, so now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna gather the rest of the ingredients that we're gonna need. And that's 4.5 cups of carrots, 3 cups of onions, and 3 cups of cooked diced ham. And then, so let's just go ahead and chop all of those things up. Oh, I thought I needed celery. I don't need celery apparently. Okay, so carrots. I don't know how many I need for 4.5 cups, but we're gonna make enough. Okay, so our soup is done, and well, not the soup, but the lentils are done here. And this step is not called for in the recipe, but I'm just gonna take a little bit of butter here, well, not butter, but it's suet. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna saute the onions in here before we put them in the pot, but everything else we're just gonna put right in the pot. So we're just gonna cook this until they get kind of slightly browned, and then we're gonna go ahead and add them into the pot here. So now the soup is totally done, overcooked for all of the amount of time that it said to do. I'm not really sure why they tell you to cook it like before you can it, because we're gonna cook it for another like 75 minutes in the pint jars. So I don't know why they tell you to do it, but I'm following the directions. So we have our jars. They are warming up in the oven here. They don't need to be warm, but it is better if you are putting hot jars or hot food into hot jars. It'll just help it to reduce any kind of cracks or anything like that. So I'm gonna get the canner, I'm gonna get it warming up on the stove, and then I'll bring you right back. All right. So we have our warm jar, and we have our clean canning funnel. We have So we have everything. We have our nice warm jars. We have every other one is in the oven. We're just gonna pull them out one at a time to make sure they stay nice and hot. And I have the debubbler. We got a clean funnel, ladle, vinegar, lids. Okay. All right, now I got the lids and the rings too. Okay, so we're just gonna fill up each one of these jars. It's a lot thinner than I expected it to be. It's a lot thinner than the soup that I made the other night or last night. So I don't know how this is gonna be, kind of like a lentil soup. I think more, or like a split piece, like an actual soup instead of the thick soup. So we'll see how it turns out. I have no idea. So we're just gonna fill it to 1 inch headspace. Got our spare jar to put that on. Debubbler. It's kind of just stirring it at this point because this is really a pretty thin soup. And I think it'll also expand a bit more in the cooking process. We'll see how that goes. we go. Okay, so then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our vinegar. There's just like a splash left in here, quite literally. And we're just gonna wipe down the rims here with our vinegar. Take a ring, take a lid here, and we're gonna put it on. Okay, and then we're gonna put it on, and we're gonna tighten it fingertip tight. And that's as tight as you can get it with these 3 fingertips. You just put it on, kind of close it like that, and that's about all you want. You just want to make sure that it is on there tight enough to hold the lid in place, but not so tight that it cranks it down to the point that the oxygen can't get out of, or the air can't get out of the jar. Because if that happens, the lid is just going to buckle. It's just going to force it out if you don't allow it to get out on its own. So into the canner. Okay. And we're just going to do that over and over again until we're totally finished with this whole pot, hopefully. Otherwise, we'll have some leftovers for dinner. So I'm going to bring you in and just kind of show you a little more up close in detail of what I'm doing here so that you can kind of get a better idea. So I got the canner all loaded up here, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the lid on it. Here we go, and we checked the vent pipe and it's clear, and this thing toggles up and down, and we're just gonna close it up here, and we're gonna crank the heat up to high. And so we're just gonna wait, and we're gonna let this go, and eventually this thing is gonna start to steam. This thing's gonna pop up. When this pops up, or if you don't have this type of canner, once this starts to steam profusely, then we're going to set our timer for 10 minutes and just let it vent for 10 minutes. When that 10 minutes is up, we're gonna put our weight on there, whatever weight is appropriate for your elevation. And then when the weight starts to jiggle, we're gonna set our timer for 75 minutes. Okay, and we'll bring you back when we're all finished. Okay, so real quick, before I actually let you guys go, there was a little bit of extra. We got a full canner load, and now we have just this little bit of extra. So we're gonna have some lunch here. That is so good. 2 things that I forgot, well, 3 things really that I forgot to put in here. It was supposed to have a teaspoon, no, it was a half a teaspoon of allspice and then salt and pepper to taste. And I intentionally didn't add the salt to it because my broth that I make is very salty. Not very salty, but it has enough salt. It's on the saltier side for most people. And then also the ham is salted. So I decided not to add any extra salt, and that was a perfect move. And then I forgot to add the allspice and the pepper to it as well, but we can just add it later. And I don't even know if I'm gonna add the allspice. I'm probably gonna go with some ginger. But anyways, so this stuff, is so good. It has a nice, just a deep, rich flavor to it, and it's definitely something that'll keep you warm on a winter's night. So I'll bring you guys back when we're all finished. All right, so time's up, and we're gonna take our soup out of the jar, the canner. I don't know if you can see that. You can see there's kind of like a line right here. Alright, so we got all of the jars out of the canner. We're just going to leave them on the counter here for the next 24 hours to let them cool down and let the seals take, and we'll bring you back tomorrow or the next day and I'll kind of show you what we have, and we'll see what we ended up with in the jars. So I'm bringing you back, and it is way more than just tomorrow, and I wanted to go ahead and show you the split pea and ham soup. This is what it looks like just sitting on the shelf. And this is what it looks like if you shake it up. It takes way more effort than it's worth to actually get it to shake up and look like this. Not worth it. But this is what it's gonna look like on your pantry shelf. It's just got a bunch of the lentils at the bottom. It's got some soup at the top here, and that's pretty much what it looks like. So I already tasted this earlier on and told you what it tastes like. It's delicious, it's amazing, it's awesome, and it's a wonderful thing to have on the pantry shelf. So it's pretty late at night and I already had dinner, so I'm not gonna bust open a jar of this to taste it because I already did. So this is what it looks like later on. You can get it to look pretty and fancy if you want to take the time to shake it up, but it's really not worth it. So I definitely hope that you guys try this recipe out. Again, you guys can find it in the Amish Canning Cookbook. I will link that one down below so you guys can have access to it if you would like to. It's a wonderful cookbook. I use it a lot. It has a bunch of awesome recipes in it, and it just has a bunch of great canning know-how and all those sorts of things in it as well. It's just a great book to have on your pantry shelf if you don't already have it. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please do give it a thumbs up if you do. Remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.